I got NFL action. I've got the president of the United States and the president of Russia, the quote-unquote summit that has everybody in an uproar to get to. Plus, Zelensky from Ukraine is showing up at the White House. Stephen A. Smith Show in the house. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do. I know it's usually 3 times a week, but I've been on vacation for a little while, been back at ESPN, got a lot of stuff to do, got a new studio that I'm moving into, got work that I'm percolating for, getting revved up for on SiriusXM, debuting September 2nd, not to mention a political show that's going to start September 17th. So I've got a lot of stuff going on, but I had a lot of stuff on my mind this particular day, and I couldn't wait to come on my channel, on my show, to tell y'all about this and to talk about this stuff, all right? So let's just get right to it, and we're going to get started with some sports first before I get into the politics. We're going to go to Cleveland, Ohio, okay? In Cleveland, where the NFL's most talked about, if not most consequential quarterback race is heating up. Dillon Gabriel, who the Browns drafted in the 3rd round out of Oregon before later taking Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado in the 5th round, made headlines with some comments he had made while being interviewed on the sideline during his preseason debut. Here's the exchange between Mr. Dillon Gabriel and, of course, this reporter, Aditi Kinkhabwala. The reporter says to Dillon Gabriel, as you can see, you gave us some fabulous wisdom on how you tune out the noise and don't let it infiltrate yourself. Will you share that with everybody at home? Dillon Gabriel. Yeah, it's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors, and I totally understand that. But my job is to compete, and that's what I'm focused on. Upon hearing this, social media immediately took this as a shot at teammate Shedeur Sanders, he being the quote-unquote entertainer in the equation as opposed to the quote-unquote competitor. This led Dillon Gabriel to revisit his comments to clarify, saying he in fact meant the entertainers were the media. Here's what he said, quote, "I'm all about my team and each other, but for me, I've explained it. Entertainers are you all. A competitor, that's what I am, along with all my teammates. We both have jobs to do," end quote. Of course, Dillon Gabriel finished his college career at Oregon, all right, where a year earlier, head coach Dan Lanning did not mince words with his team ahead of their 2023 matchup with Shedeur Sanders in Colorado, where he had this to say, maybe indicating a culture of naysayers in Eugene about the Buffs. Eugene, Oregon, that is, about the Buffs. Quote, "The Cinderella story is over, men. They're fighting for clicks. We're fighting for wins. There's a difference. This game ain't going to be played in Hollywood. It's going to be played on the grass," end quote. Oregon went on to win that game 42-6, which I watched from start to finish. Colorado got blitzed, no doubt. Oregon whipped their ass. But it is important to note Dillon Gabriel was not the Ducks quarterback in the matchup. As for the scene now in Cleveland, Gabriel and Sanders have both seen action in one preseason game so far. Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski is expected to name a starter in the next week. The depth chart will also be of interest, and it is almost certain that the team will not carry 4 quarterbacks on the roster, meaning one of Gabriel, Sanders, Joe Flacco, and Kenny Pickett will likely be released or traded, end quote. I don't believe that last part. I believe that the Browns are one of the rare teams in the NFL that's going to carry 4 quarterbacks, because I think they're looking at Joe Flacco as a safety net. You know, he's 40 years old. He's a veteran. He's a Super Bowl champion. He just took them to the playoffs a couple of years ago, and boom, you know what? They know that he could come in, whether as a starter or as a reserve, and help assuage concerns and fix what's broken to some degree. That's number one. So I think when you look at the future, although he's not that, having that guy, Joe Flacco, in the lineup, working with QB1s, by the way, working as the QB1 with starters, that is. I mean, you're talking about a situation where you're fighting for the QB2 spot, which is Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel and Kenny Pickett to a lesser degree. Kenny Pickett, as far as I'm concerned, is a career backup. He's already had his opportunities to start in Pittsburgh, didn't pan out so well. Obviously, he was a backup in Philadelphia. We know what that's about. Now here he is in Cleveland. I think he's a perennial backup. I think when you're looking at a starter for the future, you're talking about Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel. That's what you're talking about here. Let me say this. In defense of Dillon Gabriel, I totally believe him. I totally believe he was not talking about Shedeur Sanders. I totally believe that he was talking about the media. Shedeur Sanders is his teammate. Shedeur Sanders is competing. Shedeur Sanders did go out there in the first preseason games against Carolina and performed pretty damn well. The only reason he didn't play this past weekend against the Eagles had the oblique injury. We get all of that. But he played pretty damn well. And in some people's eyes, most people's eyes, he played better than Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel had a good game. 6 for 6 on third downs, under pressure, in the pocket, was throwing the ball, showed himself to have composure, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the brother played well for the most part. But he did have a pick six, and he did have a fumble to snap. Those things are true. Shedeur Sanders had a better outing than Dillon Gabriel, even though Dillon Gabriel's outing was not that bad at all. With that being said, clearly, he wasn't talking about Shedeur Sanders. For anybody that's thinking about that, they reaching. Having said all of that, that doesn't make Dillon Gabriel any less of an idiot on this particular day. Just today. I'm not calling him that as a person. I'm not calling him, and not character assassinating him. I'm saying that comment was idiotic. Because now you've made yourself a target for the media. Fuck you think you're doing, talking about the media. You haven't earned the right to talk about the media yet. You haven't. Now, the second you go out there and you suck for any reason, the media is going to be all over you because you antagonize them unnecessarily. Why would you do that? And by the way, in a capitalistic society, I got news for you. Competition isn't restricted to the field of play or the court. Competition is everywhere in a capitalistic society. Some would argue it's everywhere globally. Everybody's competing. Everybody. Wall Street, Madison Avenue, the media. It doesn't matter. Corporate America, whatever you choose, everybody's in competition. You know why? Because the victors go to spoils. Everybody don't get to have. Everybody don't get to have. Everybody is vying for their own individual position. Everybody is looking to get paid. Everybody is looking to have their value elevated so they can elevate their quality of life. Everybody. That's how it goes. So for you to sit up there and say, just because you can throw a football and you out on a football field, that you're a competitor, but other folks are entertainers, well, guess what? Isn't there competition in entertainment? Aren't actors and actresses entertainers? Don't they compete at the box office? Don't they compete for cachet? Have you ever heard of an audition, Dillon Gabriel? You think that's just confined to football players or professional athletes or even collegiate athletes or high school athletes? You think it's just confined to athletics? You don't know that competition exists every damn where? That's just a dumb, idiotic, entitled statement. Like football is all that matters. You in the NFL, bro. Why don't you go back to the days of COVID? You want to play in front of empty stands? How exciting would that be? You want to play when nobody's watching? You want to play for free? Huh? That's just not smart. I'm not calling you an idiot. I want to be very, very clear about that. I don't know you, respect the hell out of you. You're in the National Football League, vying to be a starting quarterback. You deserve respect. But you need to understand that your comments was disrespectful. We're not disrespecting you. We're commenting to you disrespecting us. Competition exists everywhere. And it just ain't with your arms or with your legs. It's also with your mind, with your heart, with your intestinal fortitude, with your work ethic, with your willingness to go out there in your chosen profession and compete to be the best at what you do. Who the hell are you to diminish anybody? You played for a great coach in Dan Lanning. He ain't playing. He's coaching. Ain't he competing against other coaches? Grow up, bro. Grow up. You're a third-round pick. And now you brought the eye of the storm down upon you because you got some people out there looking at you and thinking you were talking about Shedeur Sanders. You got others who will lean on race because they knew if Shedeur Sanders had said that, he would have been castigated and vilified. So they're saying, why ain't you getting that heat? And last but not least, if it ain't those people, it's people like me who's sitting here saying to you, yeah, we know you weren't talking about Shedeur Sanders, bro. But did you have to say that about the media? You have any idea how disrespectful that was? And totally unnecessary? A reporter comes up to you and asks you a question, and what was the question that the reporter asked? You gave us some fabulous wisdom on how you tune out the noise and don't let it infiltrate yourself. Will you share that with everybody at home? And that was your response? That was your response? There's competitors and there's entertainers. My job is to compete. That's what I'm focused on, really? Good luck, bro. Hope you can play under duress and adversity, because it's coming your way after those comments. It's coming your way. Coming up, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Alaska a few days ago, and the results are getting mixed reviews. I'll tell you where I stand on that. Plus, I'm going to get in to somebody who clearly is intending to emerge as the Democratic candidate set to compete against the like of Trump Nation. But this man that I'm going to talk about that's been going at Donald Trump seems to be having some kind of impact, which is shocking to me. I'm talking about the governor of California. His name is Gavin Newsom. I'm going to talk about him and Trump up next as well. So stick around. You're listening, watching Stephen A. Smith Show right here over the digital airwaves of YouTube. Soon to be coming to Sirius XM, Mad Dog Sports Radio. Stick around, y'all. More to come in a minute. Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Heading into Alaska, meeting with Vladimir Putin, president for Russia. President Donald Trump said the main goal was, quote unquote, a ceasefire. He said there could be, quote, severe consequences, end quote, if it did not happen. After the meeting, he said a ceasefire wasn't necessary at all, saying on social media that, quote, it was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement which oftentimes do not hold up, end quote. Some would say this shift aligns him more with Putin and less with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who visited with Trump at the White House today alongside several other European leaders from the UK, from Italy, from France, etc. So Trump responded to critics this morning on Truth Social saying, quote, I've settled 6 wars in 6 months, one of them a possible nuclear disaster. And yet I have to read and listen to the Wall Street Journal and many others who truly don't have a clue. Tell me everything that I am doing wrong on the Russia-Ukraine mess. That is Sleepy Joe's war, not mine. I'm only here, as in Sleepy Joe Biden, of course. I'm only here to stop it, not to prosecute it any further. It would have never happened if I was president. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I don't need the advice of people who have been working on all of these conflicts for years and were never able to do a thing to stop them. They are stupid people with no common sense, intelligence, or understanding. And they only make the current Russia-Ukraine disaster more difficult to fix. Despite all of my lightweight and very jealous critics, I'll get it done. I always do. President DJT. You may note as you read that, as many have, that Trump seems to have reduced his use of all caps in his post after relentless mocking from the press office of California Governor Gavin Newsom in recent days. I'll get to all of that in a second. But first things first, because there's a few things that's very, very important to point out. Number one, no matter which way you slice it, the president looks bad. The president looks bad. You slice it any way you want to. I'm not going to hold him to promises that the war would end on day one the second that he has arrived when he's already been here for 6 months and can't end the damn war. I'm not going to get on him about that. What I'm going to say is that the president of Russia was on U.S. soil for the first time in ages. The reality is he was invited here by President Donald Trump. Donald Trump said before the meeting that a ceasefire was mandatory. Otherwise, severe consequences would follow. What are we talking about here? Essentially, primary and secondary sanctions. We all understand what it is. That's what we're talking about here. And the reason that we're talking about those primary and secondary sanctions, because if you are Russia, you got more resources and more manpower than Ukraine. And the only way to get rid of it, to eradicate that advantage that they have, is through sanctions, weapons, and funds. Giving Ukraine more weapons, giving them more funding to help them continue to fight, and on top of it all, imposing sanctions. Now, from my research, I'm told that the only folks who've had sanctions against them right now by the United States is India. They're the only country that's been officially sanctioned via secondary tariffs tied to buying Russian oil. That's about it. We're still looking for more. And the reality is that based on what we're talking about here, Russia's looking pretty right now. Vladimir Putin had a photo op. He was on U.S. soil. He looks like a diplomat and a statesman instead of a tyrant murdering people, which is how he's been depicted by a lot of people here, a lot of politicians here in the United States of America and the world over. And I told y'all months ago, let's understand what this is all about. This is all about him reclaiming most of Europe, which Russia once had before his dissolution in like 1991. This is what they're after. This is what he's after. And that's where, if Trump was smart, and I'm not saying he's not or whatever because he's shrewd as hell, but in this particular instance, if the president of the United States wanted to be a bit more skillful, a bit more shrewd instead of truculent and disrespectful, maybe, just maybe, he would try a new strategy. And you know what that strategy could easily be, ladies and gentlemen? Bring up Bill Clinton. That's how. Now, what the hell am I talking about? I'm talking about the person that put Ukraine at a disadvantage. That's who I'm talking about. But what Trump doesn't want to, the reason why he might not want to do that is because it highlights the culpability that belongs to the United States of America as to why Ukraine is in the position they're in right now. That's what we're talking about here. You don't know what I'm talking about? Let me give you some history. The USSR, Russia, dissolved in 1991. Ukraine suddenly found itself with about 1,900 strategic nuclear warheads on its territory. I'm telling you my research. The third largest arsenal in the world behind Russia and the United States of America. The weapons were still under Russian operational control, of course, and Ukraine lacked the full command infrastructure to use them independently. I'm reading from my notes. I got researchers for this stuff. It ain't me, damn it. Okay? Bill Clinton's administration worked with Russia and the UK, negotiated with Ukraine to ensure those warheads were given up. This culminated in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances signed by the Ukraine, by the United States, by Russia, and by the UK. Clinton personally visited Kiev in January 1994 to urge Ukraine's president, Leonid Kravchuk, to accept the agreement. He emphasized U.S. financial support, security assurances, and integration into the global system as incentives. I'm going to repeat that last part so you get it. You get it? You get it? He emphasized U.S. financial support, security assurances, and integration into the global system as incentives. Ukraine agreed to transfer its nuclear warheads to Russia for dismantlement and to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear state. In exchange, the United States, Russia, and the UK pledged to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and not to use force against it. By 1996, 2 years later, Ukraine had transferred all nuclear warheads to Russia. Critics now point to the Budapest Memorandum as a broken promise, one of many by Vladimir Putin, by the way, since Russia violated it with the annexation of Crimea in 2014, all right, when Obama was in his second term. And Obama did close to nothing about it. And the full-scale invasion arrived in 2022 under Biden. So yeah, Clinton, as in Bill Clinton, you know, Mr. Crime Bill, Mr. leading to the proliferation of blacks being incarcerated. Remember that Bill Clinton that ultimately apologized for it in 2015 when his wife was running for the presidency? Remember that guy? That's what happened, okay? So, Ukraine gained independence in 1991. And yes, there should have been a safety net. but it was violated by Vladimir Putin. So if you're Zelensky, what are you to feel? Who's at the White House right now with European leaders? If you're Zelensky, how are you to feel after being embarrassed and set up months ago when the president and Vice President J.D. Vance was getting on them because you didn't say thank you? You should be saying thank you, according to Vice President J.D. Vance. How's he supposed to feel when you have this meeting with Putin without him in attendance? You're claiming that a ceasefire needs to happen, but there's no ceasefire. You're in pursuit of a peace agreement with all of these pledges and these promises, but nothing to hold them to it. And you got a guy who American politicians are on the record saying breaks promise after promise after promise. How is America supposed to feel at this particular moment in time? I want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. At some point in time, and I'm not rooting against our president, I'm rooting for him. With stuff like this, if Iran is a threat to Israel, which it obviously was, I don't have no problem bombing them. If somebody's a threat to America, I don't have no problem dealing with them. Hamas invaded Israel, get their asses. Find a way not to engage in innocent women and children being slaughtered along the way, but get their asses, absolutely. But that don't make everything you do right, Mr. President. You got to get a deal done. Not pledges, not promises. You got to get stuff in writing, and you got to have force behind them. Strength through force. Sanctions. Weaponry to Ukraine. European nations getting involved and adding some manpower. Them coming out of pocket to spend. They got money. It can't just be us. I'm all for that. But all of these things matters. Now they're getting back to Trump and his claims to have settled 6 wars. We all know that's an exaggeration. But here's the 6 he's referring to. Israel and Iran, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, Cambodia and Thailand, India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, Egypt and Ethiopia. According to my research, he's not totally wrong. But Politico Facts verdict, Trump's claim is rated barely true because while there was some temporary ceasefires or diplomatic interventions, these did not equate to full war endings. So once again, embellishment and exaggeration have come with his proclamations or his claims. See, these are all things we got to watch out for. But having said all of that, we still shouldn't be rooting against him. Having said all of that, we still should be rooting that these things reach fruition and that these pledges and these promises and these ceasefires are long lasting. We shouldn't be rooting against the damn president of the United States. But there's nothing wrong with calling him out if what he's saying ain't true. But I'm going to go back to one thing that I'm going to say in President Trump's favor. What we're not going to do, because we fear here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, is look at him and say, oh, excuse me, he's the cause for the war. He's the cause for Russia, Ukraine. You don't have to engage in bravado, Mr. President, sticking your chest out like you accomplished something just because Vladimir Putin echoed your sentiments that this war would have never happened if Trump was in office and never departed from 2020 to 2024. That's not the issue. What you should be saying is, yo, I didn't start this. I didn't put Ukraine at the incredible disadvantage that it was at. I didn't ask them to get rid of all of their nuclear warheads. I didn't ask them to give it and return it back to Russia. I didn't make this deal with them. Clinton did. He's the one that disarmed them. He's the one that weakened Ukraine. He's the one that made promises to them that have been unkept by administrations to follow. Which, by the way, is Obama to some degree, because if Clinton made that promise and that commitment, and then 20 years or so later, Obama is in office, and that's when Russia invades and takes over Crimea, and we do little to nothing about it, even though they're in clear, stark violation of what was promised by them to the Clinton administration, to the UK, in the Budapest Memorandum, then what the hell is up? That ain't on Trump. That's on them. And this is why we got to be honest. As American citizens, if we know the facts, damn it, if you don't know, you don't know. Everybody ain't got time to know this stuff. Hell, I barely got time to know. I just got researchers. But you got to know something. And if you know it, you got to have the courage to call it out. So what Trump is doing right now is not ideal. Damn it, I don't think it's that impressive. I think it's a bunch of pomp and circumstance. But we ain't going to act like he caused this now. It's Democrats in office. It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place, courtesy of Russia's instigation, no matter what they try to say to Trump. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States. And now here they are having to beg for support that they're owed because of what we promised them as a nation. We promised them this. You owe it to the Ukrainians. You absolutely do. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I like spending billions of our taxpayer dollars to them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is promises made are supposed to be promises kept. You promised them America. You can't talk to them. And they've been bombed by Russia. They've been attacked. They've been assaulted. Their territory and sovereignty has been threatened. They're the ones who've lost 15 to 20% of their territory through no instigation of their own, and you talking to them like they the villains or they're on an equal playing field to Russia. Nah. Do we really, really want to concede more territory, putting Russia right in parts of Ukraine that puts them in the backyard to take them over even more easily, thereby gaining more territory and more of a stranglehold on different parts of this nation when you know that Vladimir Putin's desire is to reclaim Europe? Come on now. Come on now. And it's because of this. It's because of this reality right now that I'm about to say something that I never ever thought I'd say sitting in this chair. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has a chance to win the presidency. I never thought those words would come out of my mouth. I never ever thought those words would come out of my mouth. Not with the shit I see going on in Los Angeles and the state of California. But we're now getting to a point where people are picking apart the Trump presidency. And there are positives that people, haters, don't want to recognize. I'm not going to be that way. But there are negatives that are undeniable. And don't get me started as a black person with some of the things that I see him doing in an effort to appease a bunch of white folks out there. He might not be some white nationalist or somebody who doesn't give a damn about black people, but a lot of them are. I'm not talking about most. I'm not talking about all. I don't view white and black folks and everything like that way. Individuals based on the content of their character. I flow with that. But when you see some of the things that have been transpiring under the Trump administration, it has not been pleasant to see. It's that simple. And we just have to be honest about that. And in the process of being honest about that, we got to call it like we see it. Right now, Donald Trump's approval rating. Gallup polls, July 2025, 37% approval, the lowest of his second term. Pew Research, August of 2025, which we're still in, 38% approval with 60% disapproval. Reuters/Ipsos, July 2025 poll, 40% approval, also marking a low point. Approximate range is 37 to 40% approval. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom's PPIC, February 2025, 52% of Californians approve of his job performance. 55% among likely voters. UC, University of California, Irvine, after the clash with Trump over the National Guards and the Marines coming into the city of Los Angeles, remember all of that? July of 2025, his approval rating jumped from 38% to 56% approval. Typical range, 52 to 56% approval in state polls. Why is this relevant? Because you're talking about somebody, let's call it what it is, say this about Gavin Newsom. The brother looks presidential. I mean, listen, you know, I don't look at men that way. That's just not my flavor. But the brother does look good in the blue suit. I mean, he looks very presidential. He really, really does. Hair slicked back. Pat Riley might be jealous. Good looking dude. Excellent, excellent speaker. Can articulate his thoughts clearly, highly intelligent. Knows the issues. Knows how to fight. And is willing to take on Trump. Now, Trump ain't who he's going up against. That's why I think he's got a chance. See, I don't think he could beat Trump. But unless the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution is circumvented and Donald Trump is allowed to run for a third term, okay, then he ain't going against Donald Trump. He's going against J.D. Vance, who has been rendered relatively impotent, like most vice presidents are. Marco Rubio, I mean, he's a very powerful and influential individual, smart as hell. Our Secretary of State, obviously overseeing our national security. Marco Rubio is no joke, but does he really galvanize a base? I don't know that. So with Trump here, your biggest hope is Trump to maintain his level of influence, and then all of a sudden here he is talking about, yo, y'all vote for this guy because we don't want somebody like Gavin Newsom or Gavin Newsom, because that's what he calls Gavin Newsom, Gavin Newsom. We don't want him in office. And maybe he could galvanize the base, but that's not the point. The point is, can Gavin Newsom get people to come out for the polls? Because everybody don't live in California. It might be the largest populated state in the country, but everybody don't live in California. So the point is, outside of California, what will they really know? What will they really fear? And can he get people to the polls? And, oh, by the way, even if they do show you things to fear about Gavin Newsom, okay, still in all, if you're so turned off by Trump, where will that leave you? Where will that leave you? So you got to think about that. Now let's get to some of these issues. Because if you're Trump, some of the positives in a lot of people's eyes, according to the conservatives, executives, orders, and deregulation, immigration, and the border. Remember, illegal border crossings have fallen nearly 90% since December of 2024. Marking one of his most prominent campaign promises, realized foreign policy moves, NATO members to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. That was a milestone long considered unlikely. Okay, you got to pay attention to that. In mid-2025, his administration reportedly curtailed Iran's nuclear program and brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Got to give him credit for that. Political base loyalty, even though beyond the Republican Party, when you go to centrist, and obviously the liberal left, you eradicate them and just focus on his core Republican support. It remains relatively high as of this month. Around 85% of Republicans continue to approve of Trump's performance. So he's got his base on lock. But here are the criticisms about him. Authoritarian drift and eroded institutions. We know all about that. Partisan Justice Department overhaul under AG Pam Bondi. The Justice Department was accused of political purges, sidelining dissenters, and weaponizing legal institutions in favor of Trump-aligned officials. Of course, there's a federal takeover of local police forces. You saw what happened in California. You see what's happening in Washington, D.C. He's getting criticized for that. Economic instability and market volatility from tariffs because it's up and down, up and down, up and down. We hear all of these pledges, $15 trillion and counting. Pledges ain't reality, y'all. They're promises. When are they going to be kept? We don't know if that's true or not. We got to hope that's true. Pledges don't mean a damn thing to me. You don't promise people stuff. I want it in writing. I want that stuff inked. I want to make sure you're forced to honor those pledges. Then I'm all for it. As opposed to that, there's no legal bond into that, so I'm not falling for that. Undermining global health and scientific expertise, that's something with the left, and we all know that. But let's get to Newsom, because it's important to point this out. Some of the positives: California Environmental Quality Act, signed sweeping reforms, introducing non-exemptions to fast-track the construction of affordable housing, child care centers, food banks, and wildfire mitigation infrastructure. Deserves credit for that. $2.5 billion wildfire relief package. In response to the devastating wildfires, he secured bipartisan approval for the $2.5 billion aid package. Deserves credit for that. $50 million legal defense fund. I think this counts against him personally. Newsom endorsed the $50 million package aimed at safeguarding state polices, defending immigrants. The funding splits between the state DOJ and legal aid groups to combat federal overreach and mass deportation efforts. I don't know how that's going to go across the nation. In California, that might be cool. In New York, that might be cool. Sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. But throughout most of the country, people ain't vibing for that. So I don't know if that's a positive. But then, of course, Breakthrough for Government Efficiency launches an innovation initiative. The Breakthrough Project mandates that all state agencies identify and implement performance improvements, etc. That's okay. Balanced budget with tangible social investments. Newsom signed a balanced state budget that includes tax cuts for military retirees, universal pre-K, expanded school programs, free school meals for all children, literacy investments, more housing, and lower drug costs, highlighting both fiscal discipline and social priorities, okay? Here's where the problem kicks in, ladies and gentlemen. This is for Gavin Newsom. And I know he ain't been on the show yet. I've asked him numerous times. Damn it, I ain't asking no more. You don't want to come on, that's your loss, my brother. I'm doing fine without you. I'm tired of asking. I'm tired of asking, okay? But let me say this about Gavin Newsom. I told you the good parts. Here's the bad. Homeless population. The highest homeless population in the United States of America. Also has the largest share of unsheltered homeless people, comprising 2/3 of its unhoused population and 45% of all unsheltered individuals nationwide. Now, I know California's a large state, so it's larger than anybody else, and it has more citizens, so the numbers can be misleading. But damn it, this is bad. This is stuff that the Republicans can use against you. Among students, did you know that homelessness hit record highs? Among students. In 2024, nearly 4% of California students were reported homeless, the highest level in a decade. And in Monterey County, 16% of public school students experienced homelessness, more than triple the statewide average. I'm not finished. Unemployment is the highest in the nation as well, not just homelessness, unemployment. In July of this year, just a month ago, California's unemployment rate rose to 5.5%, the highest in the U.S., driven by sharp losses in tech and office jobs, despite adding 15,000 jobs overall. The poverty rate, not just unemployment, not just homelessness, but now the poverty rate is also the highest nationwide. California continues to hold the highest poverty rate among states, with an estimated 18.9% in 2023, up from 16.4% in 2022, up from 11% in 2021. So we're going downhill. Using the supplemental poverty measure, which accounts for housing costs, California's poverty rate is extraordinarily high at approximately 23.5%, the highest nationwide. Housing crisis and affordability remains critically unaffordable in California. In 2023, only 16% of prospective home buyers could afford a median price single-family home. The median home price far exceeds the U.S. average, over 2.5 times higher, and housing supply lags behind demand by a wide margin. And out-migration/exodus, California ranked last for net U-Haul movements for the 5th consecutive year in 2024, underscoring continued domestic out-migration. It lost about 197,000 residents due to moves elsewhere. The broader California exodus trends highlight a net population loss from July of 2022. 259,000 residents left for other states, a pattern only offset by immigration. That can't win a presidential election. Two things must happen. One is what Gavin Newsom is doing, going the hell after Trump in a fashion that even has Trump thinking twice about things. This is Gavin Newsom's press office. Many people are saying, and I agree, that I, Gavin C. Newsom, America's favorite governor, deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. Why? Because of the most incredible maps in the history of mapping, even Columbus. These maps will end the very rigged elections, make America great again, retake Congress for the people, and save democracy. Nobody else could have done this. Certainly not the self-proclaimed master deal maker Donald Taco Trump, tiny hands, who missed the deadline and lost. Sad. Peace through maps? No one has ever thought of this before. I am the peacetime governor now, stopping political wars, governing now, stopping political wars before they start. Harmony, unity, even love. The Nobel Committee has given this award to lesser people for much less. I, Gavin C. Newsom, actually earned it. The world will be safer, kinder, and frankly more beautiful because of my maps. Give Gavin a Nobel. Many are saying, thank you for your attention to this matter. Gavin C. Newsom. Ladies and gentlemen, that was brilliant. He's trolling the ultimate troller, which is Trump. Trump convinces Governor Abbott in Texas to engage in redistricting. Democrats boycotted for a couple of weeks. They come back. Ultimately, that redistricting is going through, so they're going to gain 5 Republican seats in the House. And as a result of that, Trump will be better positioned for his policies to continue. Gavin Newsom's doing it now in California. And they're saying because of it, he's going to gain even more seats. And they're going to go up to having about 92% Democrats represented in the state government. Ladies and gentlemen, forget all of that. He's trolling Trump in his ways. MAGA, the most incredible maps in the history of mapping. He's imitating and emulating Trump and actually doing a better job of it. What this is going to do is galvanize folks on the left who are hardcore about it. Maybe they'll turn out to the polls in numbers to vote for him, which is going to make it harder for the Republicans to do the same because Trump is scheduled to leave office. And is J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis or somebody going to do enough to galvanize folks in America? That's the question. That's the question. Gavin Newsom is elevating. Gavin Newsom is showing you that if there is a Democratic candidate for the presidency of the United States in 2028, it is him. He can't be governor in California. He has to depart in 2026 due to term limits. This is his next play. They're going to hold all of that stuff that I mentioned to y'all. Homelessness, affordability. I didn't even bring up crime, the job market, employment. They're going to bring all of this up. But if Trump slips, if the wars don't end, if the pledges aren't honored, immigration, he's got that down. But everything else, inflation, GDP issues, unemployment, wars, if all of this thing comes, and dare I say there's more chaos in the streets where you are utilizing the National Guard and members of the Army or the U.S. Marines who are trained to kill. They're not a police force. They're trained to kill. When you're bringing them in the cities and people still harp on authoritarian rule and all you're doing is what you accuse the left of doing. Weaponizing the DOJ, weaponizing the FBI, weaponizing others to have a heavy hand on American citizens, while in the same breath doing photo ops with Putin without getting ceasefires or peace deals. Gavin Newsom might make things interesting. He's got a bad record in some people's eyes. But Sean Hannity and them boys can't throw Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Zohran Mamdani and Bernie Sanders. No. Gavin Newsom, if nothing else, is a different beast to deal with. You heard it here first. It's getting very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting. Hope y'all enjoyed the show. That's it for the Stephen A. Smith Show. You heard what I had to say about Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump and all of that stuff. Got a special edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show coming up tomorrow. It's me with my oldest daughter. It's special for her, special for y'all. I don't know how special it is for me. It's true. She's the one person that can shut me up. I created this monster. But I say that affectionately because my daughter's an angel. She's a princess. She's all of the above. She's just a monster when it comes to my wallet. You know? By the way, as an aside before I get on out of here, let me give y'all this nugget, all the dads out there, this nugget of information. Technology has been advanced, so when you do something for your kid, you give them your card or whatever, and then you know how the ping comes to your phone when stuff is being spent? Don't do it. It hurts. It's like like you're being in shock or something. Because all they do is spend your money. Her and her sister. And there's nothing I can do about it because I'm in love. I'm in love with them both. That's what love does to you. Anyway, we'll get into all of that tomorrow. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace and love.